on the impact of how having constant people from another world with superpowers thrown into your world affects that world.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, there's just 10 more people with really broken superpowers tossed into our worlds. Is anybody gonna do anything about this?
Can I get you to start by just like introducing yourself, introducing your books, and maybe like talk about those books a little bit about like what they are, like what types of books they are?
Gotcha. I'm Chikao J, and I, just middle-aged dude who really likes everything nerdy. I mean, I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but RPGs especially, anything that you can assign a number to and like kind of have some interaction with on the design is really something I'm attracted to. And I think that goes to show for my books. I wrote Traveler's Trial, which I think is my most popular series, Traveler's Trilogy. Um, and that's kind of about a agoraphobe, someone who's a little bit neurotypical, I suppose. Doesn't like to go outside very much, and he gets kind of caught up in typical isekai type happenings, subway crash, and him and a bunch of other people go into a trial, fight a bunch of monsters, and each have a unique system. And his essentially is kind of the crux of that book, where he gets to every day enter his own personal little home space and kind of build that home through the experience he gets and through the monsters and power-ups and stuff like that. And then that home empowers him in turn so that he can fight more monsters and level up and be stronger. It's also kind of like the dream of every adult where they wish they had more hours in the day, So, very simple, very good book. And yeah, check it out. And I recently wrote something I'm pretty proud of, but didn't do very well, but Self Necromancy, super fun, very goofy. I love time loops, love Groundhog Day. I love the Monoctoloop, which is, a book people should check out. And Mother of Learning is also one for time loops. But yeah, if you ever thought about how horrible it would be to relive the same day over and over while apocalypse is happening, yeah, Self Necromancy.
That's all back to you. So it's the two. I think you had one other one as well, right? One other
I
series.
did. I had a series called Homunculi.
Yep.
I actually pulled that from Amazon because I just wasn't proud of it. I wasn't proud
Oh,
enough of it. So I think I could have done better personally. But also having like 3 editors work on the book, I think was detrimental to it as well.
sure.
Having 3 different people edit it at kind of different stages and stuff, I think was a kind of rookie mistake. And I want people's first impression of me to be something I'm proud of. I just wasn't proud of that. So
Sure. That's
yeah.
actually really interesting. So well, we'll touch on that afterwards for sure. So of your two stories that are still up there, do you find, so you said beforehand that Travel's Trial is your most popular series. Are you still working on that one now? Is it, you said it's a
Yeah.
trilogy, so are you working on the third? So what is
Yeah,
your
I'm
current
working on
day
the
look like?
3rd book.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 3rd book is about 50% done right now. It's a bit of a spoiler, but it's called Traveler's Demise. And yeah, it's a very good book. So far I think it's fun. I've always include like at least one like typical dungeon dive experience where you're like getting the wacky monsters that your DM at D&D might throw down, or like, some goofy mechanics, etc. We've got a really cool haunted house in there, which I'm a particular fan of in the genre. But yeah, it's really good. It also has a lot more relevance for the travelers and the other people he came through the world with. Whereas the second book is more about experiencing the new world, understanding the background and lore. The 3rd book really focuses heavily on how the impact of, it's a little boring saying it like this, but the 3rd
No?
book really focuses on the impact of how having constant people from another world with superpowers thrown into your world affects that world.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, there's just 10 more people with really broken superpowers tossed into our worlds. Is anybody gonna do anything about this?
Yeah. I think that's actually a lens that doesn't get like talked about a lot because I think I was talking to someone beforehand about the idea that in a lot of the more popular stories, a lot of the world gravitates towards like making it possible for the main character to do the things that they can do, whereby like you talk to someone and it just works out, or
Mhm.
you go and do something and it tends to work out. And even when things don't work out, it's not always in an organic way. It's like, oh, I'm making it not work out so that I can sort of make it work out later on. Like this is actually a backwards way of making them stronger, sort of thing. And I think a lot of the times we don't talk about like the societal impact or the impact of like an apocalypse at all, or in your particular case, someone just arriving in a world and just doing all these crazy things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like I think I do a good job of kind of explaining it. There's like some lore. There's like one of the characters in the world kind of tells the main character a bedtime story he was told about like the travelers that are kind of the boogeyman, but they're the boogeyman for the bad guys. And
Mm,
then they kind of quietly ride off to the sunset afterwards, and um, which is kind of foreshadowing. It's not kind of, it is foreshadowing for the third book. Um, there's a lot of foreshadowing. I imagine that this is going to be a book where people are going to read book three, hopefully, and be like, "Oh yeah, that did happen in book one, and I didn't notice it."
mm.
So yeah, hopefully it'll be really like that. But yeah, this one has a lot to do with that kind of impacts of like super powerful beings staying in. You know, yeah,
No, that's great. I think that's honestly fantastic. And how has it been to sort of like come to the close? Because would this be the first series? I know the first one
yeah.
took
This is the first one that yeah.
the first one that you'd finish off. So how does it feel to sort of like get close to completion? I know you're not there yet, but how does it feel to sort of like get close to
It's
completion?
way harder. I feel like if this was just a book one, I would have been done already.
Yeah,
But I'm trying to do like every character justice. I'm trying to make
yeah,
sure that everybody has like at least most of the threads in the story kind of like woven together and pulled close.
yeah.
I'm also in the thing where it's like there are naturally characters in a world that you naturally encounter that unfortunately you only get to see for this book. And I'm trying to make sure that like they don't overcome the other characters or like but also at the same time it's natural to introduce new characters as your book goes on but also not let them steal the limelight. But you know, it's one of those situations where um, this one's a little bit of like a conspiracy, and you're trying to like figure stuff out with Koji. And I tend to give the reader a little bit more information than the main character. The main character's name is Koji.
Mm.
Um, and so hopefully it's a fun, enjoyable journey.
Yeah. No, honestly, a lot of the things you're thinking about are things that like I've dealt with before. Like I've finished one series and it didn't go well. And I think as a result, as I get closer to finishing off my next series, not finishing it, but getting closer to, I also have a lot of those same thoughts about like wanting to do a tight ribbon on it, wanting to make sure that you give the readers, but also the actual main character, the characters themselves, like enough justice as you introduce new ones. So I'm totally on board with everything you're saying. Do you find that while you're writing, are you a really introspective person? Like, are you someone who tries to think about all the different aspects of what's going on at the time, or do you find that you can go like and fly off the seat of your pants a little bit more? Do you think like do you have to think about the entire scene in its entirety, or can you just write about like certain pieces of the scene?
I would say that I tend to think about what the reader wants to read.
Mm,
And I feel like if it's a fight sequence, right? For example, I want to be talking about the most like flashy or like most impactful thing in the fight,
sure.
or like kind of whatever the main character would be seeing. In this particular instance, Koji is, you know, not trained in combat. He's not secretly learned Muay Thai or anything, or any, you know, he's not a secret mixed martial artist. He doesn't even know video games, doesn't know like spells and like, you know, rating and WoW or anything like that. So he's very much like just attracted to like whatever the is in front of him. And so his attention sometimes is just kind of like all over the place. And I feel like I
Mhm.
write that into the character. But at the same time, he does have a lot of, especially now as we approach book three, you know, we kind of have a lot of abilities, but he especially has a lot of movement and tactical type abilities now where he can traverse the battlefields. And that gives him kind of time to, when he resituates himself, create this eagle eye or like over perspective of the battlefields. And a lot of times, That's the moment I'll transition from kind of like an upfront in your face, like fireball flying past you, feeling the heat in your face,
Hmm.
smell of blood, to the more like the slower, laid out before you, cluttered chairs on the ground, no sound kind of thing, describing the overall battlefield and atmosphere.
Sure.
Um, yeah. Does
I
that
think
make
that's
sense?
no, it does make sense. It absolutely does make sense. And I like to like I like hearing about how we're actually getting into like the writing process itself. One thing that I didn't touch on beforehand that I want to make sure that we have like an opportunity to talk about is you said that the main character is neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that again, not getting into personals, but is that something you've done some research on, or is that something that like was difficult to write about? Did you sort of have to look at it from a different lens to sort of get in the mind of Goji as you were doing so?
So Koji specifically, and I've interestingly enough, because so I've not been like bandering him about as an autistic character, but I've had a lot of people just tell me that he is, or like,
Sure.
in reviews, people are like, this is a great example of an autistic character.
Yeah.
And I did write him with that in mind. And yeah, I have a lot of personal experience and a lot of research on that type of stuff. I was involved in a program during university, specifically with autistic students who receive scholarships, and spent time with, um, a lot of people for that for years and years and years. And I feel like I have a uh, personal connection to that,
Sure.
and also other people's experiences too, that I've heard of, listened to, and spent time with on a personal, professional, and social level. So,
Sure.
yeah.
No, and I think that's something we don't see a lot of. Like one story that comes to mind is Hell Difficulty Tutorial that I think had a character that was very similar. Again, it's like you said, like people sort of pointed out as someone who likely has, and it doesn't take the author like highlighting,
Mhm.
oh, this person does, for them to say, okay, no, they likely do, and it sort of um, drives a lot of their decision making in the story and stuff. So I think it's a really cool lens to come from, and I think
Gotcha.
it's so great to show different types of main characters across different stories and stuff.
Yeah, I always think of it as not just in life, but in literature too, is that I never want to put a label on something. I
Hmm.
want it to be, I want you to be able to read it and know, I guess. And I feel like with Koji's personality and character and the books, I think that hopefully that comes across and people got it. And it's some people have definitely, a lot of people it seems like have, the majority. And thankfully, also there's a progression for Koji. In book one, he's very stuttery, stammery. He's a little bit nervous. He has no idea what's going on. He's never heard of an isekai in his life.
Hmm.
A lot of the other people are like, "Oh yeah, this is popular fiction. This is what I've wanted every day of my life. I'm gonna be a superhero." And he's just over here like, "Why would you want this?" And in book two, he's a little bit more confident. He stutters less. He stammers less, despite being in a completely new world and like being overloaded with knowledge and just all this stuff. He is much more confident. Has grown as a character, and that's how I tried to write him. And thankfully, I've received positive feedback.
Yeah.
Again in reviews and ratings and stuff that people have gotten that he is grown as a character, which I feel like is important.
Oh, absolutely. I think having a story that can show personal growth, along with obviously like the progression fantasy that we're all hoping for. I feel as though a lot of the times people get lost and in those things, the stats, the growth, the cultivation, whatever it might be. But
Hmm.
people really do tend to stay for those actual like story aspects, like making sure the story is strong and the character is strong. Really does make sure that we're not just writing D&D, we're not just writing like whatever those other like play as your own character sort of stories are. We're writing stories that happen to have stat sheets or cultivation and stuff like that. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think a good example is my character, Koji. He, stammers, stutters, etc. When he's nervous and when he's just like being in a social atmosphere. But when it does get to combat or other stuff like that, he is very much, willing to do the tasks, no hesitation kind of thing.
Hmm.
He wants to survive. And his progression in book two is very much more that he's more willing to put himself out there, be confrontational. Does he like it? No, but is he willing to do those things for his growth, for to solve problems, yes. And I think kind of more popular example that takes place over like, 9 books plus would be Lyndon from Cradle. I don't know if you've read
Mm.
that series. I imagine most people have, but
Mhm. Very
he
popular.
starts off, respectful, bowing, kind of, I wouldn't say scraping quite, but pretty close in the first book. Um, but by the final book, he is, in charge, working through all these things. Not even the final book, 3 books from when he's flying around in a fortress type thing.
Sure.
And that's a good character progression right there. So
No, absolutely. Do you find that you sort of, so prior to starting to write, maybe as part of your writing journey as well, did you have certain like types of stories that you gravitated towards? Like, is there any particular story that sort of like prompted you to want to start writing yourself?
a particular story that prompted me.
Maybe not if there's not any
I
specific story, but maybe you were reading something and you said, "Hey, I can write something like this," or "I really should try writing myself," like that
Gotcha.
sort of thing.
I've actually wanted to write for a long time.
Sure.
Like a long, long time. But I kind of was answering other people's expectations for me
Mm.
and chose to do that for a long period of my life. Um, and was okay at it, pretty like successful at it. But I really enjoy writing, and I really wanted to do writing.
Hmm.
As for a specific book, I wouldn't say that there's like one specific book. I would say maybe there's like hundreds. I've read a lot of books, but maybe the first book I read and had an opinion of like I could write a story like this um, might be Homeland
Okay.
by R.A. Salvatore.
Okay. I know the author. I haven't. I don't know the story very well, but yeah, please continue.
Let me double check on that one. That's the correct. Yeah, okay. So yeah, Homeland by R.A. Salvatore. Um, yeah, so it's Forgotten Realms. So if anybody plays D&D, that's where fifth edition is set right now. Um, I grew up kind of in the back of bookstores or like in libraries, just kind of reading those fantasy type books. That and like stuff like from Robin Hobb, the Assassin series, stuff like that, and Fantasy Worlds. Were all very good. And then when Forgotten Realms and D&D type stuff got involved, I found myself making characters and kind of imagining the stories that they might have, and like the power up system there was very easy to kind of like write in my mind a story. So yeah.
That's fantastic. No, that's really, really fantastic. And do you, so were any of your stories placed on Royal Road first, or sort of did you decide to go straight to KU? And maybe why did you make that decision?
So I put my very first series, Homunculi, on
Mhm.
Royal Road just to like kind of test run to see if I would get any interest, and also um, to build connections in the industry to like get to talk to authors and like have something to share and see people's feedback to see if like if what I was coming up with was worth anything. It was hard to get authentic feedback. I think most people are like, "Oh yeah, your story's great, man." I'm like, I see errors there. I see it where places where it could be improved. Now that I've written like close to 1,000,000 words,
Sure.
you have to come on, my guy. Like you don't just tell. Please don't just tell me it's great. Please tell me like where it could be better.
Yeah. So you didn't want people to just stroke your ego. You wanted to actually hear like criticism, like actual
Y-
criticism. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I wanted constructive
Yeah.
criticism,
Yeah.
which maybe I was being a little optimistic. I understand Royal Road is uh, not maybe the place for that, but I have always been, for a long time, I read books on Royal Road and did not interact with the community. So I always imagined it as this glorious, very nice place
Hmm.
where there's just authors and people who are really excited to read. And maybe, maybe don't Royal Road sometime if you're really trying to publish a book. Maybe don't Royal Road until you're like really confident and have it edited. So sometimes there's some not nice stuff going on, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's interesting how there's like a whole business side of the whole like railroad funnel of sorts. And there's the concept that I think a lot of the times nowadays, especially because people recognize that funnel exists,
Hmm.
do exactly what you're saying, where they write the first book, they make sure it's as polished as possible. Where in the past you would have had these stories that are really like work in progresses, and they would have been things that like people can really like, yeah, pick at a lot more. And there's always going to be things to pick at. But nowadays, I think people are going into these things, the railroad funnel specifically, with the intention of saying, okay, no, this is pretty close to finished, and I want to get as
Yeah.
much traction as possible with the intention of posting it on Roll Road. And even there's the ones nowadays that like the you sell it to a publisher, and even the publisher is like, hey, I want you to put on Roll Road first. Like I want it to be there. Like I want you to get those readers. So it's so interesting how it's sort of changed the whole landscape of writing, especially within the genre, but just in general, which I think is
Yeah. I think it used to be called Royal Road Legends back in the day.
sure, yeah.
But I've been reading on there for a long time, and I did take a break kind of as I was working and all this other stuff. So, but when I sat down, I was like, I really want to write a book. I've been dying to do this my entire life. Want to write stuff. Finally, I'm at a situation where I've kind of gotten everybody else in my life taken care of and met everybody's expectations.
Hmm.
So I'm going to write a book for myself. When I went on there and I'm like making my author account and doing all these things, I'm noticing like, there's a professional author that just released his first book on here. There's like, full blown editing on here. There's
Yeah,
like crazy, like, I was like, what is happening right now? These are not the same people that I saw on here 5 years ago with like, MS Paint backgrounds as
yeah,
their covers.
yeah.
That those stories were great. I was trying to find a story earlier, and could not find it anymore because it's been buried. So I was like, all right, well, be lost the annals of time, I guess.
Yeah. Well, no, you're absolutely. There's a bunch of stories on there. Like, I'm so sad to see certain ones go on hiatus, and similar to you, and during that period of time, I have so much going on. Sadly, that I don't go on Roll Road as much as I used to. But there's certain stories that I found there that were just like fantastic. Ones that never made it to KU, or ones that were
Yeah,
never finished
yeah,
in the first place, where the author just for whatever reason stopped, and that happens a lot. But there's definitely a lot of like true gold on there, and
for
it's good
for
to
sure.
see when certain people can go on KU and can get picked up by a publisher and stuff like that and do very well for themselves. So it's really cool to see.
There was
Uh,
one I was just looking for a little bit ago.
yeah.
Like the name, I think part of the name was Twilight something or other, and it was the top of Royal Road for a few years, or like in the top 5 at all times. And I'm just scrolling through trying to look for it, and I cannot find it anywhere
Ooh.
on there. But it was like
Okay, who knows?
kid
If
gets
you,
reincarnated way back in the day. Mom and dad, he's super magical, flying around in the city. Very cool stuff. It was super fun, and it was back before this genre kind of blew up too.
Mhm.
So it was like, it's not like he's kind of just out copying someone, but very good book. Can't find it at all on there. Like I said, I
Well, who
think I
knows?
know what the name was, but
If we can get a few people to watch this at some point, maybe someone who's listening will know which story you're talking about. They'll be able to find it, which would be really cool. I think internet connections like that, I think, are always really cool to see. Uh,
yeah.
I want to touch on the one of the things you started with as well. So, as you have done those three series, and like you said, you took down the first one. And again, you don't have to get into any personals, but I am curious to sort of hear about. You mentioned you took down the first one because you felt you had like multiple different editors looking at it from different perspectives and might have sort of muddled with it. But do you mind just touching on what sort of drove you to, yeah, remove it, and sort of do you think, sort of to get to it more like theoretical and again a little personal, if you don't want to get into it, let me know, but do you think that your own expectations of yourself might have been one of the cruxes that caused you to bring it down in the first place?
Yeah, there might be something to that. My own ego might be one of the things
Sure.
as an author. I was for sure trying to write a story that encapsulated a lot of things and telling like and kind of weaving together a lot of threads, and it was a large undertaking, but and maybe my skills at the time didn't necessarily match up to that. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the things I wrote about, and I know I have some people who have reached out and be like, "Oh, I love this description there,"
Yeah.
because it was more descriptive and the environments were very much more detailed than the two series I have out right now. Um, and I think that there is a world where I'm going to go back and rewrite those or reformat them and take them to like big boy professional editing companies and be like, "Yo, um, please help," after I've rewritten them. But that takes a lot of money. I'm sure
Sure.
costs for editing. Good
Yeah.
editing takes a lot of money and a lot of time.
Yep.
Um, and yeah. But so when I initially posted that on Royal Road, it didn't have any editing besides my own. Turns out it's really hard to edit your own stuff because it's hard to see your own flaws.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of stumbled into someone who was a professional editor, but not in the fantasy genre. They like work as an editor for like websites and stuff like that. Very
Sure.
nice person. Was like, "Yo, I'll work with you on this and edit." We ended up doing a bunch of edits together. I think the first like 20 to 30 chapters edited by them. And then they eventually were like, "I've got too much stuff going on. I have to go get a certification and do this." They're like, "I cannot do this anymore." And I was like, "Okay, I understand." Um, so then I went and found another editor, um, and they redid the first like 30 chapters, and they kind of trash talked the other editor a
Oh no.
lot, which was I didn't think was great. And there was some other stuff like that. Um, there were some probably yellow or orange flags looking back, and eventually I kind of was like, "Hey, let's cut ties with this," Um, the attitude that they had towards some of the people, um, you know, was just not great. So I just decided I didn't want to work with that. And then thankfully I managed to meet someone else, JJ, who is an author in the genre, and met him in an author community. And he was nice enough to help me out with edit on that. And he basically wrapped up like the last like 50%, 60% of the book that was
Sure.
remaining. And also was nice enough that when he makes like an adjustment or like finishes something, he kind of posts it in there, and then I'll be like, okay, So I was legitimately becoming a better author as I was working with him on those types of things.
Which is awesome. Yeah.
Um, so that was nice. But ultimately, he does have a job. He does write his own books, kind of just a stopgap measure, and I do need, a professional editor. So, but yeah, having I think three other people's hands in the mixture and myself being my first book and probably not doing as good as I should have kind of created the situation where the style I think is a little bit like jerky, especially for the first book, and it didn't come across in the way that I wanted it to. So just wasn't
Sure.
proud of it, like I said.
No, and that's totally cool. So do you want to jump into can I hear so I'd asked beforehand for three stories that you think are sort of hidden gems and
Hmm.
I'd love to hear which ones, and like I've said to others, I'll try and put up the images of those stories so that people can go and check them out afterwards. So not to put you on the spot, but if you have those three stories, I'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's funny that you brought up Royal Road a lot in this conversation because we're about to go there.
Are we going to Roll Road? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'll go with the first one. I think is um, the middle ground for popularity.
Sure.
But Dungeon Heart, one
Okay.
that started on Royal Road, very good series. Dwarf gets reincarnated as a dungeon core, makes a very beautiful, elaborate dungeon. Isn't super like bloodthirsty or anything. He really just likes to craft and make new stuff, and it's very cool. Um, Yeah, and it did get ported over to Kindle and got ported over to an audiobook. And I think they're like 3 or 4 deep now. It's very successful. I'd heavily recommend checking it out. It has very good vibe.
Is it the
Uh,
one that's The Singing Mountain by David
yep,
Sanchez Ponton?
yep,
Awesome, awesome.
yeah. It's
Perfect.
very good, very solid. It has, I think the author is like a geologist or something, and it has that kind of like sense of like realistic kind of earth or formations are shown kind of in the dungeon, and it has a very good like grounded sense of cool stuff. But yeah, I would
Awesome.
for sure recommend that. I check it out. Think it came out around like pandemic, the official release, but it's been on Royal Road for a little while. Um, I see a lot of tier lists nowadays, and I feel like that guy doesn't get as much credit as he deserves. I feel like that's a really good book. So
Awesome. Great.
my next one is just a full blown like just fanfic basically on Royal Road. We were talking earlier about the stuff that deserves more recognition or the authors have just disappeared, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to recommend the Abyssal Dungeon
Oh, okay.
on Royal Road. Yeah, it has like like almost 100 chapters. It's pretty good, and it's a full blown like dungeon core story. But it's underwater. Primarily is like your first 30 years like with like animals and like all this other stuff, and then you've got like merfolk interacting with like adventurers on shore and everything. It's very cool. It has a unique perspective that I legitimately have not read on any other story. Um, and this isn't some big author out here. This is just some little guy who wrote a cool story that he really likes,
Yeah.
and I really like it too. So, hopefully I can share it and more people can check it out.
Awesome. And number 3.
Number 3, I actually went looking for the Twilight one for this. I couldn't find the name of the story. But the number 3, I feel like I'm gonna go with one that's probably the most mainstream. But just kind of remind everybody that it did start on Railroad. Beware of Chicken.
Oh,
Yeah, I think now I haven't read. I don't think I've read book 3. I think that's out now because I'm a little bit behind on everything. But I've read book 1. It was great. I've read book 2. It was pretty good. And yeah, I'd recommend people checking it out. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's wholesome in a lot of ways. A little bit of funny, a little bit of action. Yeah, it's good.
no, I think there'll definitely be a bunch of people who recognize that one, but I think it definitely deserves to keep getting called out because people absolutely love it.
Yeah, I
Um,
feel like if Beware of Chicken is detailed and clever in its writing, and so I feel like if someone listening to this likes Beware of Chicken, um, and they don't mind less comedy, check out the other two
okay.
because they both have like a suitable amount of detail. Because like Beware of Chicken, he really cares about the like kind of environment, the farm animals, the kind of ecosystem, and like how everything there works together. And I feel like that is represented in the other 2 books I listed.
Yeah. And no, you're absolutely right. There's an aspect where you have a bunch of stories, and I don't want to. This isn't meant to be a criticism at all because I think it works very well. But there's certain stories where they're a little bit less detailed. So one I'm reading right now is A Soldier's Life, which starts off as very, very little detail, and it definitely gains more detail as you go on. But because it has so little detail in the beginning, it's a very fast-paced story, which I think a lot of people
Mhm.
do love. I think of other stories like Master Hunter K, which is very similar, like very, very focused
Callback.
on what's very focused on like what's happening as opposed to like the descriptions of the scenes as much. But there are some stories that definitely delve into that a lot more, and I think there's a big market for that right now where people really do appreciate stories that can be descriptive in the way that you used to see like more fantasy stories being descriptive as well. So it's cool that you've shouted out those 3, which is fantastic. um, I'm gonna showcase. So let's do a little game as well. And I'm looking at the time, so I want to make sure I can get to this as well. So I'm gonna
For
share
sure.
my screen really quickly. And I call it a game, but really I want people, so despite the fact that we've talked about this quite a bit already, I want people to get a sense of sort of like your reading habits, your opinions of sort of books. But really, I'm showing 6 books. So for those who are just listening along, Jake's Magical Market, Primal Hunter, He Who Fights with Monsters, All the Skills, Dungeon Crawler Carl, and then Defiance of the Fall. So these are stories that I think like right now within the current meta of sorts, if you want to say meta or not, are probably some of the most popular. And of these,
Mhm.
obviously they're very different. So I'm wondering, when you look at these, sort of like what comes to mind to you, and then sort of which ones did you sort of enjoy, and which ones do you think sort of like inspire your writing, maybe? Yeah.
I think I have a question for you, if you don't
Hmm.
mind first.
Of course.
I think you said that these are very different stories, but I look at 4 of them and think I think they're pretty similar.
Ooh, okay. So I think Primal Hunter and Defiance of the Fall are basically this a very similar story. I don't want to get canceled, but very similar stories. He Who Finds His Monster is an isekai. Um, Dungeon Crawler Carl is a post-apocalyptic, so I would say that one's more post-apocalyptic. All the Skills is deck builder, and then Jake's is a few things, but
That's true. That's true.
post-apocalyptic and deck building. So that's where I see them as different. Where I recognize Primal Hunter is apocalyptic, and
Mhm.
I recognize Defiance of the Fall is apocalyptic as well. So there's definitely 3 or 4 apocalyptic books here, but I think the setting and the way in which they do it ends up being fairly different. But I agree with you that yeah, there are 3 or 4 here that are fairly apocalyptic in nature.
Yeah. So kind of like top left, and I'm gonna go across the top, and then I'll kind of clockwise
Sure.
down to, and I'll end on all the skills. But yeah, so my personal take for Jake's Magical Market. Um, Now I've talked with JR. He's a really cool guy. We're actually from the same area
Oh no.
before he moved. Unfortunately, I moved away from that area right before I met him online, and we started talking a lot. If you listen to this, JR, because I sent it to you, we should play Dota sometime. Uh, but Jake's Magical Market, great. I love the story. I'd also shout out Portal to Nova Roma if you're in the mood for
Yep.
something more serious, which is his other series. I like Jake's Magic Market a lot. I feel like book 2 might be a little bloated, a little long. I say that with love, with some weird spots in it, but I love Jake's Magical Market. I love, especially one of the opening scenes there where he is kind of like dealing with a goblin at a car as he comes out of the market. I wish there was more market, would be my one take, but I love the system. I love the ideas. And I think Jake is really cool.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that take is very. You see that over on Reddit all the time. It's a very common take. Honestly, of these, that first book, Jay's Magical Market, is probably one of the books that like inspired me a lot while I was writing my. What was I writing? I was writing probably the 5th book in The Weight of It All around that time, and I go through these lulls where I have a difficult time like writing for a little bit of time, a little bit for varying different reasons, and yeah, the first book in that series really inspired me a lot. I thought it was a really good book. But sorry, go on. This isn't about me.
so I also want to say, of all of the ones that are on this, the 6 books that you're showing me right now, just shout out Danielle Terterci. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right, but
Huh?
the art for that book is standout, unique,
Yeah,
in a sea of the same in our genre.
yeah,
And I just appreciate it for a breath of fresh air. I wanted to shout out that artist. So
yeah. Great shout out. I think we don't talk about the artists enough, and especially again, we could absolutely talk about so many things for just hours and hours, but um, and I don't
yeah.
want to get canceled with this, but AI is getting so popular right now, and especially on the rural road side, people are focusing so heavily on AI artwork and using it so often that I think that the artists that were already hurting and struggling and not doing the best are now even being disheartened and disproven a little bit more,
Mhm.
because of that push. And it's a bit of a shame to see, because you look at these book covers, and we have some of the best book covers of any genre, I think, in my opinion. Obviously it's a
Mhm.
biased opinion, and for us to sort of lose that sense of yeah, community as a result of the AI push is a bit of a shame. But sorry, again,
No,
please
I
back.
I, I agree with you. I just want to kind of like add to a point of like we have the most exciting book covers by far.
Yeah,
Other people have like a book cover that's like a crystal or a book cover that's like a
yeah,
single sword crossed. You know, we've got literally like a whole magical market. We've got Defiance the Fall down here going crazy. We've got Dungeon Crawler Carl, like dynamic cover right here
yeah,
with like the slanted cover art and giant like war machine that a goblin's riding, you know.
yeah,
And we got, you know, Jason Asano and He Who Fights with Monsters with like the starry cloak behind him. All of
yeah.
these are like, you know, really unique covers and really are in a genre where people enjoy and appreciate that compared to, you know, just the solitary black with a moon on a moon on the cover.
No, absolutely. You're so right. Okay, you get to talk about one more book, and then I want to make sure I wrap up and get some more time for you to talk about you. So one
Okay.
more one more take that you might have on what we're looking at.
Okay. Well, I will preface this with I've read all of these, I own all of these, and I have listened to all of these except for all of the skills. I'm sorry, my guy. I will get to it. Um, so I'll go with this is a toss up because I like Primal Hunter, but I really like Hugh Fights with Monsters, and I actually was on Sugarloon's Patreon for a while before I started writing, where just reading the books ahead of time, reading the chapters ahead of
Mhm.
time, man puts out an incredible amount of effort, incredible amount of writing. He is very prolific, is what I'll say. You know,
Yeah,
I was on there for a while, and he was putting out a couple chapters every week. Pretty quality, pretty long chapters.
yeah,
Book one and book two, and to some extent book three, are all fantastic. They tell pretty coherent, super cool stories. And I appreciate the fact that his protagonist, Jason Asano, is kind of like a uh, I'm trying to look for the correct word, but an openly jerk. Like,
yeah. I was gonna
yeah,
say he's a bit of a narcissist at times. He's a bit of
yeah,
a yeah, jerk is a good way at times. Again,
he,
he's a know-it-all. I think is probably a
yeah.
better
He's
way to put it.
always very smug. He's always got the answer.
Yeah,
He always thinks he has the correct choice. And you know, he's not unwilling to be the bad guy if he needs to be. I'm thinking of one specific fight scene with his own allies. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great series. I think it stands out unique and also has a lot of fun abilities, especially with like the calamities or apocalypse monsters. I can't remember their names right now. But yeah, I would check it out. It's very good.
great,
First one is an isekai similar to my own, where someone gets put into another world um, and gets a system and starts getting magic and abilities. And I won't spoil the other books for you, but he does eventually go back to Earth. You know, there's some stuff there too. But yeah,
yeah. That's where I Yeah, that's the thing. If I was to get quizzed on some of these, I'd be very. You made a comment beforehand about how you've fallen behind on certain series, and that's basically the story of my life. I read because I've read Traveler's Trial. I really did enjoy your first book. I haven't read the next ones because I basically get to read the first book in series, and then I sort of drop off for a little
the,
bit. So I
the
really want to
second
get back.
book, man, you got to read the second book. I'm so proud of what I did for the end there. The end is like, I feel like maybe one of the best things I've written. The final fight scene with like the power ups, the upgrades, with
Yeah,
like everything that comes together is phenomenal. I feel like that. I've heard feedback from other people too, so I feel like I'm not just tooting my own horn here, but I
that's
feel like the
amazing. No,
end fight
I
scene
really enjoyed it.
is great. So for book two,
Oh, that's great. Okay, so that sort of ties into that. So we're getting close on the end of this. So I want to
hmm
make sure that we end with you. So talk about your books one more time. Talk about the ones that are going to be on sale as part of the massive lit RPG sale that's going on. And then if you can, tell people where they can find you. If they wanted to sort of follow you, if they wanted to support you in some way, please talk about that at the end as well.
um, yeah. So the book I kind of want to shout out, and the book that I'm really proud of, the most recent thing I've written, is Self Necromancy.
Okay.
Uh, it is. my kind of ode to books like Mother of Learning, the Monarch Loop, movies like Groundhog Day. It has a time loop, and it also kind of asks the question of, um, you know, can you use necromancy to animate your own dead body? Thus the title, Self Necromancy, which I think is a very fun premise. Main character uses it to essentially animate his own half dead body and fight off monsters in a time loop. I mean, it's fun. I mean, who can't hate that premise?
Yeah.
And I will say the number one review or comment that I've gotten from people is that the ending was just like they got through the book and they're like, okay, this is pretty good. And then they got to the ending, they're like, all right, I got to give you like your full stars because of the ending. I did not see that coming. Didn't get it. Looking back, I now see it in the first couple chapters. I realize now what's happening. You're a jerk, but I love you. So I'm like, I'm happy that I pulled one over on the readers, that they all liked what I did. It's, a fun tale. There's a lot of action in it. Some pretty unique characters. And yeah, I hope people like it. As for where I'm at, and that's what's on sale, alongside everybody else's great books. And as for where I'm at or where people can reach me, I'm most active on Blue Sky. I do have a Twitter somewhere out there, but I don't really log into it very much. I'll be honest. I'm active on Blue Sky. I post on there for book promotions or anything like that. But I also try to be genuinely authentic, which is difficult, I feel like, in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'll just cast me posting like that I'm staring out into the rain while I write, you know. But yeah, that's where I'm the most active. I also am active on Reddit. I love to spend a lot of times on the progression fantasy subreddit, just because I oftentimes get to find hidden gems and read about like the next dungeon heart or the next dungeon crawler Carl before it's even out. And it's also kind of a smaller community with some up and coming artists, some up and coming authors, and I like to be a part of that community because I feel like kind of give back to it because they helped me and they listen to my book, give it a chance. So,
Yeah. That's amazing, man. So honestly, thank you very much for this. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that we get a few people to listen to this little conversation of ours. But if no one listens to it, I really do appreciate it, and I'm really thank you. From August 22nd to 24th, I'll be running a massive LitRPG sale. That sale will include at least 200 free ebooks, all within the LitRPG and progression fantasy genre. I'd like to thank everyone for checking out the site, checking out the sale, sharing it where you can, and an especially big thank you to all the authors and publishers who have given me their blessing to host this site. I really do appreciate it. Come grab some free books.